MNN, in partnership with League of Women Voters of the City of New York, presents Race to Represent, multimedia coverage of Manhattan elections, Council District 2 debate.
Good afternoon. The League of Women Voters and the City of New York and the Manhattan Neighborhood Network are pleased to bring you a debate between the candidates running in the council in the Democratic primary on September 10th in Council District 2. The winner will be the Democratic nominee for the seat in the November election. I am Miriam Edelman, and I represent the League of Women Voters. The candidates will be running in the new council district that was drawn by the New York City Redistricting Commission following the results of the 2010 census. Each district represents approximately 168,000 residents. Council District 2 covers the east side of Manhattan and includes the Lower East Side, East Village, Gramercy Park, and part of Murray Hill. The candidates are Councilmember Rosie Mendez and Richard Del Rio. The questions and format were developed by the League. The candidates are seated in the order of their closing statements. Each candidate will have up to 1.5 minutes to respond to each question, and if necessary, 30 seconds for a rebuttal. There will be 1-minute closing statements at the end. We'll start with Ms. Mendez. Affordable housing is rare in Manhattan. What can the City Council do to preserve and expand the number of affordable housing units?
Well, I'll tell you what I've done while I've been on the City Council. I have worked to incentivize affordable housing through 2 rezoning plans. I have worked to maintain Mitchell-Lamas in the Mitchell-Lama program as middle-income housing, and I have worked to bring extra funding to the Housing Authority, the New York City Housing Authority, that has been cash-strapped. In addition to bringing in capital dollars for renovations, bringing in security cameras, gates, making buildings accessible where individuals in wheelchairs have not been, so that we can preserve this affordable housing stock.
Thank you. Mr. Del Rio?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for having this debate today. Thank you, Ms. Mendez, for being here as well. As I consider affordable housing, I've been working in our community for 31 years. My children have worked to stabilize our community as well by working with the residents in NYCHA. I live in the Lower East Side. We have seen affordable housing squeezed out of the community. When I came into this city in 1982, there were plenty of buildings, and somehow, over time, this has been squeezed out by development, which has been steamrolling over the city. Now, my opponent has been on the City Council for a couple of terms, and you've also been the chairperson, overlooking and overseeing what NYCHA has done. And what we are seeing now is not only the loss of affordable housing, but we're seeing development just steamroll through those areas that have been set aside and for preservation for the poor and low income. I think we have to begin to start marking off some of these areas and take some of this development out of there, not allow it to continue irresponsibly. We need to incorporate both the needs of the existing community and those who are going to be moving in.
Part of the problem with overdevelopment, which I have addressed through the 2 rezonings, is to have mandatory inclusionary housing. So where any development is being built, they have to have a set-aside of affordable housing. I've done that with 2 rezonings. I've worked also with my colleague to the north, Dan Garodnick, for a rezoning there, and we had mandatory inclusionary housing there. I've also worked with Margaret Chin in a rezoning just south of my district to ensure that we have affordable housing. Part of the problem is rent stabilization and getting the state to ensure that we can keep our rent-stabilized units affordable and in the housing market.
Thank you. I'll give the next question to Mr. Del Rio. There may be a change in the stop and frisk policy. What would you do to make our streets and neighborhoods safer?
Well, first of all, what I've done over the years, and I come as a political outsider, but a community insider, someone who has brought everything that I am to this community. My wife and children, 30 years ago when we came, my sons were 3, 6, and 8. And now they're still working with me in the community. And one of the things that I did from the very beginning was advocate on behalf of the poor, as well as work with the police department to bring some relationship and communications with the gangs and the violence that were taking place. In fact, just this last week, we had a murder that took place in our community. And we have been working toward building that communication line. I think that there are community stakeholders in our communities that would be so helpful in bringing healing to these relationships. Stop and frisk, as it's known right now, it's a total violation when you are taking and profiling people because of color and maybe even dress or race. But I can say to you that in our communities, we need our stakeholders. And as a council member, I will look to incorporate and build bridges between the police and the community of faith. We know, as a pastor in the community, we deal with these children, we deal with the mothers, we deal with the victims' families, and I know that there's a whole lot more that can be done to help our relationships with the police and the community.
Ms. Mendez?
The problem with stop and frisk is not stop and frisk. Stop and frisk is well grounded in our constitutional law. The problem with stop and frisk is the way this administration, Mayor Bloomberg, and Ray Kelly have implemented stop and frisk. It's been illegal and unconstitutional. So if we get a mayor or a police commissioner that will implement stop and frisk as per the Constitution, it will go a long way. It will help community police relations. And in fact, when it's been done in other cities, it actually has helped community police relations. I am proud that I have voted for the Community Safety Act, which will create an inspector general. It will also allow an individual to sue the department, not an individual police officer, but the department, if there is profiling going on. So, and in other cities where similar legislation have been passed, it has helped the community and helped the police department have better relations. So I think that's what we need to do, is get a mayor that will implement this and a police commissioner, and we need to keep this legislation in place.
Mr. Del Rio?
Well, I think what I would like to say is that as we're working toward building these relationships, I think that, an inspector general, we're kind of pushing it in that way. We're bringing more governance and more oversight is not necessarily what needs to be done. What we need to do is get our folks and the police department to follow the law and do what they're supposed to do. And I think that can happen, and allow the police as well to be involved in making things right within themselves.
An inspector general doesn't get us more governance. An inspector general, as written by the council and passed, would only bring a review of police procedures and recommendations. It is then going to be up to the police commissioner whether they implement any of the recommendations or not. So I don't see that as bringing in more governance.
Okay. The next question is for Ms. Mendez. The Democratic candidates for mayor have proposed modifying the mayoral control of the schools. What changes, if any, would you like to see? Do you have a position on putting charter schools in the same buildings with traditional public schools?
Well, I'm not a fan of mayoral control, but I'm willing to give it a try under a new mayor. Under this mayor, I've been very disappointed. I went to school when a school was a building and a building was a school. I call it that I'm old school. However, now we see multiple schools in a building. And what happens is you have to have several principals negotiating time for the lunchroom, for the gym, for recreational space, time that they should be spending overseeing their teachers and what they're doing in the classrooms. I think co-location has been very harmful to our schools, and I like to see it go back to the way it used to be, just having a school in a building. The mayor has, under mayoral control, we don't have school boards, we have community education councils. And I feel with school boards, where you used to elect the individuals on the board and you had real parent representation who was elected from the community, they had a voice and they were accountable to the people who elected them. Our community education councils have been doing great. However, there is the public education panel that undoes everything that the community education councils do. So we've been stuck because the voice of the community has not been implemented because it gets done by the mayor's public education panel.
Well, as you know, the mayor's education panel is, well, that the persons who have been running our schools, the chancellors, none of them are educators. And we need educators. We need educators in there. We also need to partner. We need to partner with the stakeholders in the community. Now, let me tell you something about being stakeholders. When I came to this community, you know, I brought my family. We worked with the children. One of the things we found was there were kids that needed help. Our own sons worked with them. Each of my children, including my daughter, are public servants today. And what we have done is we've adopted many schools in the city, but right now we personally have been working with a PS34. And working with PS34, we were able to build relationships with the teacher, provide counseling, provide tutoring. In fact, we had an after-school program. Again, what we have done is we've brought everything that we are to the table. And by the way, all of our service has been done without being in a position of power or being in political position. This has been an investment of our lives and resources. And as we did, we worked in the NYCHA housing. We had a school, after-school program for 15 years. And those kids, eventually, my sons that were running it went into work and became a teacher at PS34. I think we can incorporate the community stakeholders, the parents, and all of those people that have an interest. There's a whole lot more that we can bring to the table that doesn't have to be a part of our budget, but it can also be engaging the people, the greatest assets that we have in our community.
And that is why, as a council member, I have worked with my parents and with the school leadership team, as well as advocates in my community, to stop the co-locations of schools that would have overcrowded existing school buildings, to stop a school for the deaf and hard of hearing to be overcrowded with children who were hearing students, and would have changed the whole culture of that public school that was there for 100 years. And I've worked to create 2 more schools to deal with the overcrowding in District 2.
Mr. Del Rio, with 168,000 residents in your district, what do you believe your future constituents want you to work on first?
Well, when I consider 168,000 people, there's a broad spectrum, of course, of different needs. First thing I would do is learn to listen, and I also bring a culture of hearing, learning, listening, and doing. And I would listen to what it is that the folks are going through. For example, there were 3 points in my life that I operated with, and I've taken the kids from the community. I've taken some of these kids that had no schooling, they had no training. We've made businessmen out of them. We've taken them through college. I've adopted one. We've had 7 of them living with us. So we've been able to identify the needs in our side there, in Lower East Side, where I have been serving unconditionally. In the meantime, as I've been out campaigning and I've been getting to know the folks over at Kips Bay and also around Gramercy, what I'm finding is that they have been upset that their quality of life has been affected, whether it's the architectural insensitivities to the irresponsible development that's been happening, the NYU developments that's steamrolling through the communities. These people have to live with conditions that are affecting their quality of life. And I want to bring about change and listen to them and stand with them when it comes time to take a vote.
Are we ready? Okay.
Yeah.
So the problem in the district has been and continues to be overdevelopment and quality of life. And during my years on the council, I have worked to bring the Department of Buildings into compliance. I have sued and stood with my residents and gone to the Board of Standards and Appeal when they've allowed illegally some building owners to build additions to buildings. And go on for many, many hours. So we've kept construction noise and had it abated. We've worked with the bar noise, and we've tried to work to make businesses better neighbors and improve the quality of life. And I've done this throughout my district. I've also worked to preserve housing. I have landmarked many buildings during my tenure on the city council in my district, and I had the first historic district designated since 1969. There was none in this district that was designated until last year, the Lower East Side East Village Historic District. So I've been dealing with the issues in the community and responding to those needs that have affected the quality of life. The unregulated noise, sanitation issues, and unsafe streets that we have changed lightings so that individuals have more time to cross the street and be safe.
I would like to say that I started to say there were 3 points. One of them is that I taught the kids as I've been training them business and responsibility. Show up on time, and think. Part of the problem is, as you've continued to speak over the last couple of years, the fact is that you've had one of the worst attendance records for these, for the meetings. So what's happened is, it's on the record. And the thing is that there's all of this stuff that's been happening in our communities, including NYCHA, has happened because it's on your watch and you haven't been paying attention. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, we have money for cameras. We have money for, we're doing all these things, but you had 7 years so far.
Your time is up, Mr. Del Rio. And let me tell you, my attendance record, it's a matter of public record. I've had 80 to 90%. There was 1 year, last year, 2012, where I might have dipped right under into the high 70s, and that was because my mother was hospitalized, and I had to travel to Puerto Rico and stay there for 2 weeks, and then I had to travel every month. I think my constituents would understand that. I've been there for them, and so I had to be there for my mother. My record is not up for debate. I have provided funding for NYCHA. That NYCHA hasn't used it is one thing, but don't try to put that on me. The Housing Authority, I've tried to rein it in. The City Council gave $50 million, and we had to have hearings because they've been sitting on this money since 2007.
Okay, I'd like to go ahead with another question. We'll start with Ms. Mendez. The City Council receives approximately $50 million in discretionary and member item funding for the 51 districts. What is your position on how this funding is allocated and who determines how the money should be used?
There is money that is given to each of the council members. Some of the discretionary funding is not evenly distributed. It should be based on needs and on the district. And there is also city council initiatives, and there is speaker funding. And we can make recommendations for speaker funding aside from the pot that's usually given to the individual council members. And I think that this is all very important and that we should keep this discretionary funding in place. It becomes the bread and butter that we can give to organizations in our district. For example, I was able to leverage with some of my capital funding to get the Speaker and the Manhattan delegation to give supplemental money to bring $5 million to Nuyorican Poets Cafe that was severely flooded during Sandy. With my own capital dollars, I would not have been able to do that. But working in conjunction with the other pots of money, we were able to bring the resources that they've needed. And this is what I've done everywhere in my district, is to allocate the funding evenly throughout the district for schools, parks, public housing, and to create other affordable housing, and then to try to leverage the other money that's in the city council to prevent closing of daycare centers and of senior centers.
Thank you, Mr. Del Rio.
Well, since I haven't been on the city council, I could only go by what I see the needs are and what we have been able to do and what I think needs to be done. And one of those is the children. Our kids, there was a shooting that took place last January, and we had a demonstration against violence, and where all the politicians show up. And one thing that happened was one of the children called out themselves and said, we need programs, we need help. First she told the kids, we gotta stop killing each other. Well, here we are 6 months later, and we just had another incident, okay? And again, it's the need. What's happened is that the finances are not going to where the real needs are. We're pulling out children's programs. We're closing down community centers. We've eliminated senior centers. We're talking about eliminating Meltzer housing and putting a tower there where the elderly get to sit and enjoy some open space. We're taking the open spaces in the NYCHA properties, and we're going to develop luxury high-rise. We're calling that, then adding a little bit of 20% affordable housing. Now, folks, let me tell you, what we need to do is bring the finances and the resources to create an environment where these people are protected. And Rosie, I'm not quite sure all of the nuances of what happens in there, but I could tell you I'm leadership that you can trust, and I know that I can listen, and we will be able to make a difference, and we need change. Up until now, you've been there 2 terms, and this is where we are. The poor are being pushed out, the middle class is being pushed out, and you're doing all of the stuff that you're saying you're doing.
Mr. Del Rio.
Yes, ma'am.
If you were planning to run for city council, then I suggest you find out about all the nuances. Because I've been doing the work prior to the city council and while in the city council. And I can tell you, my record is one of accomplishment. In 2008, I leveraged $18 million from discretionary funding with Speaker Christine Quinn so that we didn't close any NYCHA community or senior centers. And in June, in the middle of June, just prior to passing a budget, the Housing Authority announced it was going to close 107 centers, and I, working with the Speaker, got $40 million so we wouldn't close those centers. I've stopped the closing of daycare centers and senior centers. My record is one of accomplishment, so don't mistake me with Mayor Bloomberg.
Well, I would like to respond to that, and here's the problem I have. Right now, you've had 2 terms. You're saying don't mistake you with Mayor Bloomberg. You have been a great advocate, right, in some of the things that you care about. But the fact is that you're running a 3rd term because you actually overturned democracy. You were part of a whole system that decided, let's deal ourselves another term. And here you are. We're having a debate. We shouldn't be having a debate.
Mr. Del Rio, this is where you're mistaken, and this is where nuance, you need to learn what the process is. I am running for a 3rd term based on a voter referendum, not a legislative vote. I voted against overturning term limits because I think it shouldn't be done by the legislators. It needed to be done by the voters. My position is we should not have term limits for the legislators. We should have it for the executive, just the way it is on the federal model. So maybe you should learn a little bit and figure out what the record and the process is on legislative votes and on voter referendums, because you don't understand it, apparently.
Okay, I'd like to proceed with the next question.
I just went by with a video that's on your website. Okay. And anybody could go there and see it.
Then I don't know what you're talking about, sir. Okay. You're very much mistaken.
I'd like to present the next question to Mr. Del Rio. Council members recommend 1/2 the members of the community boards in their district. Do you have any criteria for such appointments, and how will you use the board's recommendations? Mr. Del Rio on this one.
Well, I guess as I have been been going and visiting to the community board meetings, and I've seen and I understand the process, yes, I would definitely want to see representation, more representation and engagement, even from the minority community. Somehow there's a disconnect there. I want to see more representation for them, and I would also look at what are the qualities. I want to get business people involved. I want to get people that represent all of the district, and I will review the people that are there. I think that we can create a coalition of people that also respect one another and consider. Right now, a lot of the decisions that are made are pretty much, they're made without a lot of input from the community. Some of that is because of a lack of communication, lack of understanding, and just maybe it's a little bit of a resistance. So I would like to see the community board and the community be much more engaged.
Ms. Mendez? Oh, I'll let you answer this question, and then we'll go to
On
closings.
community boards, I have always engaged in interviewing all of the candidates myself, either by phone, if we're already in the middle of a budget process, but preferably in person. What I look for is a record of activism, of involvement, or some life-altering change that has made an individual want to become active, and the willingness to serve on the board. It's an unpaid position, so when people come to the meetings and participate, they really can be the voice of the people. But when there are many absences, and I've removed individuals for absences on the board, it detracts from the community boards being able to do their work when they can't have quorum. So recently, I appointed an individual who lost her grandchild to a racing car and wanted to get involved in traffic safety issues. In Community Board 5, where it used to be more of a commercial area, and now it's become more residential, they've wanted more parents on the board, and I've appointed more parents. I've also made sure that I've had diversity on each of the 4 boards that are in my district, but that I have people who are in tune with the work and the issues so that they can come back and have meaningful input in the community boards.
Okay, it's now time for our closing statements. So each of you will have 1 minute for a closing, and Ms. Mendez gets to the first closing.
Thank you. So I have represented this district for 8 years, and I have been an activist prior to that. Very active in the community, fighting the Con Edison expansion and the decommissioning of a plant on 38th Street. During my years on the council, I've worked and steered 2 rezoning projects. I've expanded and preserved affordable housing. I've been the leader on public housing, bringing much needed money to the Housing Authority. And I have fought for rent-stabilized, rent-controlled tenants, as well as keeping Mitchell-Lama and project-based Section 8 programs in the city to maintain our affordable housing stock. I have been a leader against co-locations and overcrowding of schools, and I've been bringing in needed resources and technology into our school buildings. I have been an advocate with a proven track record, and I hope I earn your vote on September 10th. Thank you.
Mr. Del Rio?
As a community activist and someone who's basically given all that he has for our community for the last 31 years, both my family and my life, I have seen so many needs come. And as a grandfather now, I speak and I think about the grandparents that are so heartbroken and are so insecure because of what's going on with their grandchildren. I say that we can pull together as a community and bring to these parents and to these grandparents peace. We can work toward bringing security and housing. I say that over the years, nobody had to tell me what to do. When 9/11 happened, I was the first clergyman there, and I worked to open the city gates there to bring the clergy into the community because those are our people that were hurting. When Sandy happened, we were able to pull together what was needed. So I'm a leader that will show up. I will be there. I want you to know that I'm there to serve And I have compassion and faith, and that's what will keep me going for you.
I want to thank the candidates for participating in today's debate. For more information about voting, the candidates, and your poll site, contact the League of Women Voters of New York City at our website, www.lwvnyc.org, or call us at 212-725-3541. Or for more information about the candidates, visit vote411.org. Remember, only registered voters enrolled in the political party having a primary election may vote on September 10th. All registered voters, regardless of party, vote in the general election on November 5th. Thank you.